Who's ready to fight? Because today we're talking about discovery writing. Let's keep in mind this is an opinion piece, it's in the title, so let's be civil in our fighting. Even, wars have to abide by the Geneva Convention, so let's just imagine that applies here when I say the following sentence. I hate discovery writers. I don't hate them, I just don't trust them. And real quick, if you don't know the difference, a discovery writer is someone who has an idea of what will happen in the book, but doesn't use a formal outline. They kind of just sit down to write and see where the story goes. This type is also called the explorer. Then there's the other type of writer, which is known as the outliner, also called the architect. And they don't sit down to write until they generally have a full-fledged skeleton of the story built, and they fill in the details as they go. And the reason I'm not a fan of discovery writing in general is because reading a book takes a lot of time, particularly a fantasy book. If you go to the fantasy section of Barnes & Noble, you'll find books that are 250 pages long, but that's very much the minority. The majority of books in this genre are 400 plus, some reaching well over 1,000 pages. Definitely looking at you, Brandon. And I don't understand the arrogance, maybe is what it is, of an author believing that I should trust them for 1,000 pages of unplanned material. Like, to me, that's just insanity. I know it goes through revisions and I know editors look at it, but it's like being a kid and your parents are going to read you a bedtime story. Would you rather have one that has been scripted and edited and perfected over a year's time, if not more? Or do you want them to sit down at your bedside and make something up off the top of their head, not knowing what the characters will do or how it will end, just making it up start to finish? I personally would feel cheated. Now, probably the two best examples of discovery writers, most famous examples at least, would be Stephen King and George R.R. Martin. And I know that they're both beloved writers, but I'm going to focus on mainly Stephen King here because although George calls himself a discovery writer, he only does so because he doesn't formally use an outline. But he's also infamous for taking a f***ing decade to write a book. And I don't believe he's sitting at home watching TV for 8 years and then goes, okay, I'll write a book now in these last 2 years. I think he's working that whole time. Maybe he's not writing, but he's thinking, working out details, and that's really what an outliner does. So I'm not giving him 100% discovery writer title. Then you have King. Both Martin and King would tell you that they don't like outlining because when they outline, it feels like they've already written the book and they lose that energy and love for it. So it's not as fun to actually write it. But King would go on to say that he thinks plot is just a device that gets in the way and is a last resort for bad writers. That's in his own words. And in the piece that I took that quote from, he goes on to tell a story about his book, Cujo. Now, spoilers if you haven't read it, plug your ears, but the little boy in the book dies at the end. And Stephen King says he didn't know the boy would die until it happened, and that he was sad about it, but happy that these other characters lived. And I'm sitting over here like, you did that. That was you. The book could have ended differently. The boy could have lived had you planned it out and shaped the story in different ways, where yes, a sad thing did need to happen at the end of the book, but because you planned it, it could have been a different sad thing. And now you can't do that because you don't outline. I don't want the story that you made up on a whim. I want to know that you thought about the plot and the character development in your world for a number of weeks or months or years even, adjusting it along the way as details needed changing and seeing if the storyline worked or not. Because you're asking an audience, the author's asking you and me and many other people to spend 20 to 40 hours of their time, depending on how long the books are, Brandon, reading this thing that they've made. And I want to know that they made it with precision. Now, this is also where I'm going to double down on fantasy writers because fantasy writers have so much more detail that can go wrong and not add up in the end. It's made up of histories, planets, characters, magic systems, maybe magic items, and how they interact with the world. And I just don't think you can tell me that the author, in that brief seconds it took them to come up with it and write it down, that they explored every possibility of how that item or magic or history affected their world and story as a whole. They just didn't. They thought, this is where the story's going because it's what's in my head and I'm going to use it. And that's what I disagree with. Because to me, and again, this is an opinion piece, you're free to disagree and I'm sure people will. But to me, I don't feel like I'm reading a piece of art, like a finished work that had been honed and perfected. I feel like I'm reading the proverbial made up bedtime story. But if I know you outlined it and you tie, let's say, book 1 to book 5, I know that was the plan. I can go back and look at all the little details you had and foreshadowed and these things that happened and revel in the accomplishment of this 7-year plan coming to fruition over a 5-book arc. Whereas if I know you're a discovery writer and you do manage to tie book 1 to book 5, in my head the whole time, I'm just going to be thinking, you got lucky. I mean, isn't that it? Luck? If you tied something, 7 years later to a different book and you didn't plan it, it seems like whatever you tied together wouldn't be the best thing for it. It would be whatever you can fit into the small crack of the story that doesn't completely blow up the previous books. It narrows down what the ending of the surrounding details could be, and that's why I feel cheated. Like, fans of Stephen King, meet me in the comments here, just you and me, okay? Do you know what background he came up with for It the Clown? It the Clown has an arch enemy named Maturin the Turtle, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, it doesn't matter. But the turtle eventually helps defeat the clown. But millions of years before that, the clown and the turtle lived in the macroverse, which is a galaxy or something, and the macroverse came into being because the turtle vomited it into existence. That's the kind of shit that you get when you don't outline. So I hope we all learned something here today. I mean, I didn't, but meet me in the comments and let me know if you care or not how your author comes up with their story, or if I'm just being picky. And also let me know what some of your favorite books and authors are. Just as my own personal venture, I'd like to look up how they write and edit, because it's the kind of thing that makes me curious. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. I post new videos at least once a week. I might start doing 2, who knows, but I'll see you next week. Thank you.